Hello, I'm Miguel, Executive Director of CONDESAN. CONDESAN is the Consortium for the Sustainable Development of the Andean Ecoregion. I want to thank Professor Sara Ulloa for inviting me to talk with all of you about the Andes challenges, but also about the opportunities. Today you are going to be introduced to the Andean territory, the Andean population, the challenges we are facing, but also the opportunities that rural population has to overcome poverty and social exclusions. We want to provide you a clear vision of what is happening in the Andes, but also show you the opportunities for mutual cooperation in the future. Let's start.
Los Andes, la cordillera más larga del mundo, influye en el clima, la energía sísmica, biodiversidad, cultura e historia de todo el mundo. La enorme variedad de ecosistemas hace de la región andina uno de los lugares más biodiversos del planeta. Los Andes influyen en los medios de vida de 7 de los 14 países de América del Sur, como una fuente importante de cultivos. Poseen un papel decisivo en el suministro de agua a más de 100 millones de personas, representan una parte importante del PBI de la región, proporcionan energía y han dado forma a la cultura de una gran parte del continente. Sin embargo, muchos de sus habitantes viven por debajo del umbral de pobreza y las presiones, tales como el uso no sostenible de las zonas altas, la creciente urbanización y el cambio climático, amenazan seriamente la sostenibilidad del desarrollo en la región. ¿Cómo cuidamos la vida en los Andes? Con acciones colectivas, fortaleciendo y empoderando a su gente, promoviendo una gestión sostenible de los bienes y servicios que proveen sus complejos ecosistemas, revalorando y reconociendo los valores culturales y espirituales que las montañas andinas ofrecen a la humanidad y compartiendo el conocimiento que se genera. Todos en los Andes tenemos un rol importante para movilizar su riqueza y así superar la pobreza y asegurar el bienestar común. Los niños también, solo mira.
¿Ahí nomás la pone?
Ahí en los Andes, mire cómo está adornado con las aves, con el cóndor. Pero allá está el colibrí.
Vivo en Oyacachi, que sí es un paraíso. Que les digan a los papás para que los lleven para ver cómo es y cuidarlo muy bien. Los niños que me ven aquí, por favor que cuiden todo el bosque porque es mi hogar, mi hogar.
Ahora mismo, niños y niñas de escuelas rurales de Ecuador, Colombia y Perú están participando activamente en una caminata. Ellos, además de una escuela en Venezuela, han participado también en un concurso de pintura regional para celebrar a las montañas andinas.
After this first video, where you were introduced to what is the Andes and the challenges, but also the opportunities that we have, I want to briefly describe the timeline of CONDESAN. CONDESAN was created in 1992. As you all remember, in 1992 we had the Earth Summit in Rio, where we start the discussion about sustainable development. agendas. The pilot sites were created in different points along the Cordillera to ensure that the diversity of the Andes is taken in account, and that we can have a representative of the different social and environmental characteristics of the Andes. So we had one pilot site in Cajamarca and Puno in Peru. We had one pilot site in Cochabamba and La Paz in Bolivia. We had one in Mérida in Venezuela. We have El Ángel in Ecuador. We have La Miel in Colombia. And also we have Jujuy in Argentina. So this is, when we talk about the beginning of Condesan, we must remember that we work in those pilot sites, and we have created science that has been used for planning the development in all of these places. Later on, Condesan is starting to become involved in several activities at the regional level. For example, in 1995, Condesan were involved in the organization of the IESA. IESA was a symposium of research and extension in agricultural systems. This is IESA in Spanish, and was very important because was the opportunity where students and scientists meet together to share the status of the research in the different pilot sites. In 1995, also Info Andina, that was the information network of Condesan, become part of a global network of information called the Mountain Forum. So the Latin American node for the Mountain Forum was Info Andina. No. We also have a very strong influence in the CGIAR system. With Condesan, hosted by the International Potato Center, Condesan influenced the International Potato Center to create their own department on natural resource management. And this is, for us, is a very important issue because this program then become an entire division into the International Potato Center. At this moment also, the consortium was evolving. The pilot sites demonstrate that the partners at the local level make progress and didn't require that the consortium provide the same scheme of collaboration. And we had a request to tackle broader issues, issues that were transversal to the entire ecoregion. So after the year 2000, both internal learnings and the opportunities that came from the international context facilitate resources or open up the possibility of working with ecoregional projects to address those issues. In the last 10 years, this regional project has mobilized more than 100 partners in the 7 Andean countries and has produced, again, important research pieces that can help local decision makers, regional decision makers, and national decision makers to improve the natural resource management. As you know, during 2002, we had the Rio Plus 10 meeting in Johannesburg, in South Africa, where we revisit the progress that the world made in terms of sustainable development. As a recognition of the little progress made by the different countries, different international mechanisms were created to support the mountain sustainable development. For example, they were created. The Mountain Partnership was created after that summit. During the same year, we have the International Mountain Year, and that was very important to raise awareness about the importance of the mountains as water sources, as providers of environmental services, as a place where the most vulnerable people are in the world were living or are still living there. 2004 was an important year also because we celebrate the second international mountain meeting in Cusco, and Condesan played an important role there. And during that meeting, the Andean initiative of the Mountain Partnership was created. And this is something that still is relevant. We have an Andean initiative in the Mountain Partnership, and we are using it to articulate the work of the different stakeholders in the Andes. 2007 is an important year for Condesan because we started to discuss the continuity of Condesan in the CGIAR system. Condesan evolved as the Andean population and Andean territory was evolved, but unfortunately the framework of work in the CGIAR forces us to limit or reduce our agenda to some very specific issues like sweet potato crops systems. And for sure, the Condesan research agenda was broader than that. The board, after discussing it for almost 1.5 years, took the decision to transform Condesan into an independent organization. So I received the challenge or the mandate to take Condesan out from the CAR system and rebuild it as an independent organization under the same principles that were established when Condesan was created in 1992. But you have not come here today to listen too much more about the Condesan's history. You want to know more about what we are doing, and this is what I am going to now explain to you. Condesan has evolved, as I mentioned before, and have now a new research agenda, and so let me start introducing you to these points. As a regional organization, Condesan has evolved together with the legal and the institutional advances of the Andean countries in issues concerning sustainable development and environmental management. Our activities has contributed to broaden the knowledge about natural resources and the way they are used in the Andes. Looking ahead, we believe that the acquired prestige will allow Condesan to consolidate its presence in the discussions and scenarios of supranational organisms in the region, while its action and initiative remain having an influence on subnational territorial scales. In the latter, we aim for the convergence of diverse actors and decision makers to translate knowledge and information into policies and practices that have a positive impact on the Andean territory and the living conditions of its population. We acknowledge that the Andean reality is very complex and multidimensional. And for that reason, we must prioritize our actions. The funding mandate of CONDESAN aims its action towards research and management in two dimensions of the Andean reality. If we look from a biophysical perspective, it focuses on the provision of natural resources and its dynamic, while from a socioeconomic perspective, it prioritizes the use of these resources by communities and its effects on their welfare. The mandate of CONDESAN guarantees that the products obtained from research become resources for incidents through spreading, capacity building, and policy dialogue in different scales, from regional to local. Based on this, we have agreed in our strategic roadmap for the period 2011-2015, and this is what I want to share with you more in detail. And I also want to share with you later two very concrete examples of the kind of programs and projects that CONDESAN is promoting in the Andes. The vision of CONDESAN is to be known as the most effective platform to articulate multi-stakeholder initiatives in different levels that provides alternatives to the Andean population in order to integrate the environment in their development strategies to profit from the economic opportunities derived from the preservation of biodiversity, ensure the food supply, understand environmental and political processes of change, and also participate in the design of adaptation strategies to improve their welfare. Our mission is to mobilize the wealth of the Andes in order to overcome poverty and social exclusion. To do so, CONDESAN seeks to create and share information and knowledge about the environment in the Andean rural societies, to promote policy dialogue with local actors, national governments, and regional organisms, and to strengthen Andean human and institutional capital in order to promote new leaders for sustainable development on the Andes. We, CONDESAN, mobilize actors from the Andean region to research and development initiatives in key issues for sustainable development. At the same time, we hold 3 institutional programs: Panorama Andino, to assess the state of the knowledge, action, and policy on priority issues; Andean Dialogue, or Diálogo Andino, to deepen the dialogue among actors in order to transform policy recommendations into actions; and Info Andina, the network I mentioned you before, that has as an objective to communicate efficiently new information and knowledge. These programs and the initiative that belong to them respond to the axis of analysis that CONDESAN has and the lines of work prioritized for this period. No? The axis of analysis of CONDESAN are 2. One is related to the global changes and their effects on the region, and the other one is on the dynamics of rural societies in the Andean countries. Let me explain to you a little more about this axis of analysis. No? The first one is related with global changes and the effects in the Andean territory and population. As we all know, Earth is on a large-scale phase of climate, hydrological, and biological changes, that differ from previous episodes regarding the incidence of human activities and the speed in which they occur. It is strategic for Condesan to focus its effort in understanding and evaluating the course and impact of these changes in the Andes. To do this, it is imperative to understand the social processes that contribute to them, its incidence in the functioning of the different biophysical cycles, and the consequences of the answers conceived by the Andean rural societies. Also, it is strategic to acknowledge that Andean production systems will be altered and affected, which is why understanding the vulnerability is fundamental for the development of action of mitigation and adaptation. This way, once established the potential impact of global change, we seek to contribute to the identification and application of a strategy of adaptation coming from rural Andean populations. The second axis of analysis is the dynamics of rural Andean society. As a response to the environmental changes and to an increasingly rapid globalization and to the influence of the market in the world economy, rural sectors in the Andean countries are experiencing a series of changes whose nature is associated with the heterogeneous circumstances in which the articulation with markets occur. The new dynamic generated in this context presents the need for new perspective of rural development in which the promotion of the productive and the transfer of modern technology are necessary but not sufficient conditions. The new approaches to rural living consider crucial both the research for social change as a new understanding of the links between urban and rural, as well as the different flows that take place among population and altitude level. This diversity is characteristic to the Andean territory throughout the 7 countries in the mountain range. Condesan must consider of especial importance the process of social capital building, the improvement in organization and institution building, as well as the political incidence for actions in natural resource development and management to succeed. In the same way, it must recognize the importance of understanding social, environmental, and economic conditions that contribute to perpetuate diverse patterns of poverty and vulnerability in rural societies. These two axes of analysis are being worked in lines of work. We have operationalized these two axes in 3 main lines of work. Exactly what I am trying to say is that to achieve our goals, we need to formulate very concrete lines of work. For the period 2011-2015, we have selected 3 lines of work: biodiversity, Andean basins, and livelihoods. Biodiversity, in the line of biodiversity, we focus, our focus is both on native biodiversity as in the agrobiodiversity. This line seeks to develop applied research initiatives that integrate relations between environmental and human systems in order to support decision making on different scales. A high priority is to understand and to affect the process of governance of the territory at local, regional, and national levels when they become barriers for the welfare of rural Andean societies and sustainable management of the natural resources which they depend on. This line of work has 2 main objectives. The first is to generate information in order to support actions of territorial planning that ensure the integrity of Andean ecosystems and the supply of ecosystem goods and services for rural women, men, and families that depend on them. The second is to promote capacity building spaces and policy dialogue that benefit from the products of research and knowledge created by the wide array of initiatives that we implement. The second line is called Andean Basins. In the last few years, Condescend has both gained substantial experience and created knowledge around water and the understanding of the environmental, biophysical, social, economic, and political dimensions inherent to it and which determine its integral management. Such knowledge indicates that water management system should be based on integral criteria obtained from a clear conception of the hydrographic basin and sustainable use of resources. On the other hand, the prioritization of the use of water must come from participatory mechanisms that guarantee its conservation and equitable access. The objective of this line is to improve the understanding of water management from an integral perspective. We seek to contribute with resources for the zoning and management of the basins in a context of participation of public and private sectors and civil society, thus helping to conciliate the various interests around the higher purpose of the conservation and best use of this resource in order to fight poverty. The third line is livelihoods. The purpose of regional development that motivates the foundation and institutional consolidation of Condescend cannot be withdrawn from the analysis of economic demands by rural Andean society or its vulnerability linked to its exposure to processes of social and environmental change. In the global setting, the end of the first decade of this century shows that the economic dynamics outgrows the political and administrative boundaries of the countries, and that it is adverse, and that its adverse effects are more profound for those who are in a position or disadvantage in competing driven context. The formulation of a line of work that deals with analysis of rural Andean economy involves the linkage and dialogue related to the articulation with markets, the creation and adding of value, identification and promotion of product with a territorial identity, and the diversification of the Andean rural family income. The main objective of the line is to analyze the social, institutional, political, and economic context that determine the access of available resources and the conditions and tendencies that affect rural societies. We aim to provide policy recommendations and to contribute to the strengthening of local and national institutions. These three lines of work are the umbrella for the different initiatives that Condescend is implementing. Now, I want to share with you two very concrete examples of the kind of activities, projects that Condescend partners are implementing. One is related on the better use of the biodiversity and how can we use the wealth of the Andes to improve the poverty conditions of the people living in the Andean regions, and so this is an example of a bio trade program, and the second one is large initiative related with water management in the Andes. And this is a global program, but we are putting more effort to present to you the work we are doing in the Andes. We don't think that we can generalize the responses for the solutions. We understand that we need to study to understand specific issues, specific conditions, and work with the population, with the Andean communities to develop the more appropriate strategy to overcome poverty and to make sustainable the development of their own communities. So what you are seeing here, there are not recipes for everyone. These are just very concrete examples where the change is happening and how we are linking different stakeholders and working to provide options for rural population.
Protecting biodiversity has moved beyond pure nature conservation. It's now about using natural resources to further sustainable development. In Ecuador, one of the most biodiverse countries in the world, indigenous communities are benefiting from an initiative launched by the UN Conference on Trade and Development, known as Biotrade, which helps them improve their livelihoods by giving them access to new markets for their sustainably produced goods. This community, high up in the Andes, has begun to rear alpacas, an environmentally friendly animal known for its fine and soft wool. Unlike horses, sheep and cows, the alpacas are ideally suited to the Paramo grasslands, as their hooves and teeth don't dig up the soil, which is an important source of water for the region. They were reintroduced to their native habitat a decade ago, but the local communities had lost their traditional knowledge on how to rear them. Now, Ecociencia, a local conservation organization, is helping them, as part of the Biotrade program, better manage the alpacas so that they can provide an alternative source of income.
Entonces ahora, por ejemplo, estamos aprovechando de acuerdo a la calidad de la fibra y de esa manera también tener mucha ventaja en el sentido de aprovechar el precio de esta materia prima.
Once a year, the community gathers to shear the alpacas and grade their fleece for quality.
Estamos todos
It is a community effort. There are 40 teams who collect the wool together. We then share the money we get with each other.
At this handicraft centre, the community is also reviving the ancient tradition of using natural dyes from wild plants and vegetables to better meet consumer demand for a range of colours.
Con mis hijos he podido estudiar para que ellas también
I'm passing on what I'm learning to my children so that when I stop doing this, they can continue the
ya me
tradition.
vaya de aquí, entonces ellas que queden representando a mí.
It's hoped that the project will act as an incentive for the younger generation to stay and work the land sustainably, rather than migrate to the towns. But for that to happen, the farmers must be paid a fair price for their alpaca yarn. Finding markets for them is a key part of Ecociencia's work.
Pero sin embargo existen mercados, lo que llamamos nosotros mercados nicho, que valoran esto. Actualmente los consumidores quieren apoyar la conservación de los recursos naturales, quieren apoyar el equilibrio de la naturaleza, necesitan estar seguros de que al comprar un producto están contribuyendo a este objetivo.
One market for the alpaca yarn is Pacocha, a small business that makes top-of-the-range knitwear. Its founder, Lorena Perez, gave up her job as a nature guide to concentrate on helping poor women earn a decent income.
It was for me like a dream to think working with an ecological animal, with poor women in the mountains, and with more women in the cities or in the town who are poor.
Lorena has signed up to the UNCTAD Biotrade Principles, which guarantee that her products preserve the environment and that her workers receive a fair salary. These three sisters earn 7 times the going rate for their alpaca sweaters, dresses and scarves.
Es algo, se puede decir, artístico.
I like this work because it is creative,
la oportunidad de ganar algo de dinero, trabajas en tu casa, puedes atender a tu familia.
While rural communities are beginning to reap the benefits from the alpaca biotrade project, their involvement in the sustainable production of medicinal teas is well established. Since 2003, 600 families like that of Emilia Ducci have grown medicinal herbs for sale.
Bueno, antes de 2002 nosotros
We used to grow
teníamos para
plants for our personal
nuestro
use,
uso,
and plants like
teníamos
chamomile were considered weeds.
un poquito para remedio, pero siempre nos caía por ahí unas semillitas y seguían naciendo, y eso nosotros siempre cuando nosotros enfermamos seguíamos ocupando.
The plants are sold to Hambi Kiwa, a producers' cooperative that offers the farmers a fair wage.
Hemos analizado que la mayoría de nuestra producción está a manos de los intermediarios. Es eso que nos obligó a conocer a gente de Fairtrade para nosotros poder obtener precios justos.
The herbs are packaged and sold as tea bags in supermarkets in Ecuador. But as with the alpaca yarn, the main market is abroad.
The foreign consumers are the ones that motivate, and they're the ones that keep the initiatives going because they're the ones that guarantee the economic sustainability of the initiative.
The global fashion industry is responding to the demand for sustainable fashion. In an event organized by UNCTAD and Green to Greener in Geneva, models show off the latest creations from top designers, using natural and recycled materials from sustainable and ethical practices. Amongst the eco-chic creations gracing the catwalk was the alpaca dress designed by Pacocha.
Depending on what sustainable fashion that you go for, and in case of this dress, it's really helping disenfranchised groups in a cultural craft that is preservation. I think, you know, all consumers can be philanthropists in a way, and if you do that through, you know, buying a beautiful dress, you're helping contribute to that.
Fashion is increasingly not just about looking good, but about doing good too. In the future, through initiatives like Biotrade, it's hoped poor communities will find more markets on the world stage for their sustainably produced wares.
So what is the key challenge identified by CPWF in the Andes?
After having been working there for 8 years, the CPWF decided to put their efforts in a research for development program related with sharing benefits between upstream, downstream stakeholders in the basin. No? Normally, the water sources are in areas where there are poor population, and the main users of the water are downstream. We have now big cities downstream demanding for water, but there are also some agricultural issues related with the use of water. The upstream population is suffering because
climate change issues, but also because the land use and other competing issues in the basins. And it is also is affecting downstream because the water they are receiving is contaminated. They don't have enough water during the entire year, so the variability of water availability is quite high. And so trying to find mechanisms that allow downstream people to receive better water, but also that mechanisms that make the upstream population improve their livelihood is the key research we are doing. No? We found that there are not only a single solution for that. The reality is very complex. We have different mechanisms, and we need to see how these mechanisms can work for the different institutional arrangements in each of the basins.
And who are you working with in the basin?
We have a partnership of around 100 organizations divided in 4 projects, starting with the very local farmer organizations up to national governments. So we have a quite diverse range of stakeholders working there, networking and engaging with the research processes, and we are contributing with also the work that other people are doing in the bases we are working with.
Hello all, I'm Marcela Quintero from the International Center for Tropical Agriculture. I'm Colombia, but currently based here in Lima, Peru. I am ecologist, and most of my professional experience have been on researching how water and carbon-related ecosystem services can be used as a new driver for promoting a better and equitable rural development in the rural areas of the Andes. This project specifically have to tackle how benefit-sharing mechanisms can be used to improve the delivery of ecosystem services, but also the share of the benefits derived from these services. When we talk about benefit-sharing mechanisms, we are talking on schemes such those that are very popular now, as is the payment for ecosystem services, but also we are now researching how other different kind of mechanisms can be used to promote a better share of these benefits. I think the biggest challenge in this project is that we have to measure and anticipate the consequence of these mechanisms in an ex-ante manner, but also in an ex-post moment. So it really requires to be linked to the policymakers, because we need to be sure that something is going to be implemented in our study sites in order to measure some kind of ex-post impact.
I want to finish this talk repeating the words of José Tola, former president of Condesan board, when he was opening a symposium that was convened by Condesan to discuss the role of Condesan during the next century, our century now. Dr. Tola says, the principles under which the Consortium for Sustainable Development of the Andean Ecoregion was founded in 1992 remain valid, and the collaborative and participatory model in which Condesan is sustained constitute the current paradigm of universal action in different fields. Moreover, they are indispensable to solve complex problems of poverty and development, sustainable management of natural resources, and the evolution of the Andean communities to a better future, based on the results of the scientific research and implementation of development policies. I want to thank again to the university for allowing me to have this talk with all of you. I hope that I have provided an overview of what we are doing and the opportunity that we have to collaborate with all of you. And I also hope that my talk can contribute for further discussions and reflections in the university community. Thank you very much.